Hello again, anatomy students. We're ready to continue our talk on the lymphatic system. Over the next 2 days, we will be looking at immunity. And so we're going to go ahead and learn why this is obviously important for our bodies in order to fend off against foreign invaders. Once we're done with this, you'll have a couple videos to watch online, and then we'll start the review. So this is our last topic on the lymphatic system. So let's go ahead and get started. There are two different types of immunity. One is specific immunity and one is non-specific immunity. And so let's start first with the non-specific immunity. This is also called innate immunity. And so we have things such as anatomic barriers. Remember that your skin, your epidermis, is the first barrier of defense against foreign invaders. And so you can also have your mucosal membranes, so in your mouth and in your nose. Those will also have enzymes that will also be able to break down certain microorganisms and other bad stuff. We have physiological barriers. For example, if you get sick, oftentimes you will develop a fever. And so the reason your body increases its temperature is that it's trying to kill off the bad bacteria. And so one of the ways it can do that is by raising your internal body temperature. Of course, it can't keep it there forever, and then once the danger is gone, then your body drops down to normal body temperature in order then to have homeostasis. Also, pH can also serve as a physiological barrier against different types of invaders. We have phagocytic barriers, and so remember, phagocytosis is when cells are able to eat other types of organisms. And so we also then have inflammatory barriers, so redness, swelling, heat, pain. Even though none of those stuff is fun, the reason that they are present is to try to fight off these foreign invaders. In addition to innate responses or immunity, we also have what's referred to as adaptive or specific immunity. And so as I'm making this video, obviously, we're dealing with the coronavirus, and so bacteria and other viruses, you want to make sure that you can build up a certain immunity, and one of the ways it does this is by the use of antigen specificity, which involves the use of antibodies. And so hopefully, doctors and other researchers will come up with a vaccine against coronavirus. It'll be antibody-based, and therefore it will then be used as an adaptive sort of immunity so that this sort of thing hopefully will not happen again. We have diversity, immunological memory, so that your body does not have to keep constantly making new antibodies. It will remember past infections, and so in case something were to come up against similar, then it would be able to fight it off quickly. And then we also have to talk a little bit about the difference between the body itself and a foreign invader. All right, I want to focus now on antigens. If we zoom in on a red blood cell, on the surface of the red blood cell, you're going to see different types of structures known as antigens. And antibodies will bind to the antigens in the red blood cell. And so an antigen is a substance that induces the formation of antibodies because it is recognized by the immune system as a threat. And so, again, it gives a warning signal to the body that there's something here that shouldn't be here. And so the antigen will cause the production of antibodies, which will then go off then to fight the infections or whatever the foreign invader is. All right. We already talked about this when we discussed the lymph nodes. We talked about the fact that there are two different types of cells produced by the lymph. We have B lymphocytes and we have T lymphocytes. And remember, the T in lymphocyte stands for T lymphocyte stands for thymus because that's where they originate from. All right. However, we also need to talk a little bit about the B lymphocytes. And so, as we're going to find out, the B in B lymphocyte stands for blood because that's where they originate from. During fetal development, red bone marrow releases lymphocyte precursors. And so remember, before, the red bone marrow is responsible for helping produce blood cells. These are your pre-B cells and your pre-T cells. About half of these cells will reach the thymus, and they'll be able to specialize into T lymphocytes or T cells. So again, the T in this case stands for thymus. The other half will remain in the red bone marrow and then specialize into B lymphocytes or B cells. And so the B in this case stands for blood. So notice all of your lymphocytes originate from your red bone marrow. Half will come down here to the thymus where they'll specialize into T cells. The other half will stay behind in the bone marrow to become B cells. And so these are two of your major defenses as you're fighting off infection. All right, let's look a little closer at T lymphocyte development. We're going to just refer to these as T cells. T cell activation requires the presence of antigen-presenting cell. These could be things such as macrophages. They could be other types of lymphocytes, B cells, things like that. Macrophages, as we discussed before, are able to digest bacterium, which will release antigens and display near proteins that are known as major histocompatibility complexes, which anatomists have mercifully abbreviated as MHC. And so if you say MHC, I will know that you're talking about major histocompatibility or complex. All right. The MHC antigens will help the T cells recognize that an antigen is foreign and not self. And so it is important that your immune system does recognize your own body from something that should not be there. All right. There are several different types of T cells, and so the names tell you basically their function. We have, for example, the awesomely named killer T cell, which goes out and destroys the virus-infected cells, which is why they're killer cells. We also have T cells, which will help to boost the immune response by activating killer T cells and stimulating antigen production in B cells. And so we refer to these as helper T cells because they help the other lymphocytes in order to fight off the infection. We also have what are known as memory T cells. These will persist in the bloodstream in order to protect against future infections. And so hopefully, if there's another strain of coronavirus, the memory T cells will be present in order to help fight those off better the next time. And then we also have suppressor T cells, which help to protect healthy cells. And so all these T cell types are useful in conferring immunity upon the organism. We're going to finish up today by looking at B lymphocytes or B cells. And so obviously, I don't want you to have to worry about the steps here, but I'm going to go through these briefly to tell you how B cells mature. We have a B cell here that is then, we have the antigen that's displayed upon the surface of the B cell. The receptor on the helper T cell will then recognize the complex of HLA class II, an antigen fragment. It's activated. Then the B cell is activated by cytokines and begins clonal expansion. Some of the progeny become antibody-producing plasma cells. And so through this step-by-step process, we can see that the helper T cell does make physical contact with this B cell in order then for it to help fight off infections as well. And so with that being said, I'm going to pause here for right now. And so we will then finish up our discussion on immunity tomorrow. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.